Daniel Rowland, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm excited to chat with you.
Me too. Daniel, you are a music producer, a tech executive, an educator. You are the head of strategy and partnerships at Lander. You are a co-founder at Audio Tool and Immersive Mixers. You are a professor at the Middle Tennessee State University. You have produced music with so many heroes out there, and you produce the music of the Oscar-winning Pixar film Piper. So many things. I don't even know where to start. This is going to be an amazing conversation. We're going to talk about music and AI and music technology, the creative act, and so many fun topics to talk about. But you know, I was describing your role, and you do so many things, right? So how would you describe what you do? And when you think about the week ahead, what's included in that
God.
week, right?
Yeah, man, I would be embarrassed to tell you what my schedule looks like to navigate a lot of the stuff that I want to be doing, right? I'm lucky, to get to do things that I'm interested in for the most part, right? Like so, and those are fairly diverse, so it means I work a lot, but yeah, so I mean, I just try to compartmentalize my time. I mean, a big part of my day is keeping up with new technology, right? I mean, the way things are changing right now, it's like I feel like, I mean, I get up at 4:35 in the morning, and the first couple hours of my day are peppered with just learning what happened since yesterday, right? It's like it's just shocking how, I mean, technology is always moving fast, but man, we are speeding up. And AI is the fuel on that fire, it feels like. Crazy times, man. So yeah, I do, and I'm lucky in that a lot of my interests, whether it's I come from the creative side of the music industry first, right? So I come as from being a musician and touring and being a player, and then getting into learning more about production and audio engineering, which I'm much more as an audio engineer now than I am a musician, and getting to then being lucky enough to meet people way smarter than me so that I could help them develop technology and plugins and AI powered tools and all of that stuff. And then of course to get to teach, I've been teaching for over a decade now, and to get to share that with my own students and be active in the music industry and share them like fresh current perspectives about where things are going. Like, yeah, man, I just feel incredibly lucky that all kind of intersects and feeds into each other.
Do you remember what was the first instrument that you learned?
Oh, guitar. I am a lifelong guitar player, and I have too many guitars around me. You have, you got a bunch in the back too. So yeah, I mean, I tried to play guitar when I was a little kid, like 6, but didn't really pick it up properly till I was about 14. And I was playing in clubs a couple of nights a week by the age of 15 and a half, something like that. And for about a decade, that's kind of how I made my living. I did odd jobs here, but I was getting paid, 3, 4 nights a week to play music.
Do you remember that those first moments with the instrument and how it felt when you were like, being able to produce sounds out of it? Was there sort of a magic in that moment?
It's I think what we can probably all relate to this. It's a magic that I'm always trying to get back to, right? We're all trying to get back into that child headspace of innocence and when you're first discovering things. But yeah, and I think it's the thing that really brought me to digital technology and to plugins and to digital tools is just like I feel that way a lot when I see the amazing with the, not everybody can be a luthier, right? Like that's a hard thing to do. It requires a lot of tools and blah blah blah, but everybody almost has a computer, right? So
Yeah.
many people have used the computer to build so many just mind-blowing, amazing things that on a daily basis, I think I'm pretty hip with what the state of the art is, and I know what's going on, but I'm constantly surprised by what people from the ages of, 8 years old through 80 years old build when they have this kind of this vast white space of the computer where they can make whatever they want. So that's why I think even though I still love traditional instruments and I still play guitar and piano and I love all that stuff, I'm just fascinated by digital technology.
What does it mean to be a producer? If you had to explain like to someone in high school, right? I'm a producer, this is what I do. What does it mean?
Yeah, boy, I do less. I feel these days I do less production these days. I feel like startups are my new. I treat startups the way I used to treat bands, if that makes any sense. But to provide some context, because that's what you're asking. Like a producer is a really nebulous term because it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I mean, the way that I look at production or being a producer is you're working oftentimes, most of the time with an artist, obviously, and you're helping bring whatever vision they have to life. And that could be, helping them write the song. It could be, for me, it's oftentimes bringing in new sounds and new technology so that they can to really be the fuel that helps them go in directions they would have never dreamt of and surprise themselves. The thing that I try to do, whether it's with my students, the tech I build, or the artists I work with, is like, I want to give them something back that they never is beyond what they thought their grasp was. It's like beyond what they thought they could do. It's better. It sounds crazier. It's different. And if you can help somebody, whether it's a student or a professional, like dig deep and come up with something that is beyond what they thought they could do, like that's engagement, right? You're going to keep coming back over and over as a client, as a friend, as a collaborator, or whatever for that. So that's kind of what I look at production is, but it can be a lot of things. I mean, some producers are incredibly hands-on and play every instrument and the artist just sings. Some producers, Rick Rubin, kind of is a spiritual advisor to people, right? More than he
Yeah.
is a player or an engineer or anything like that. So it just runs the gamut.
Where will you put yourself in that spectrum of multi instrument or
Yeah.
like Zen advisor like Rick?
Yeah, well, I am lucky enough to where the artists I predominantly produced for one artist for most of my career, which is crazy, or co-produced with him other artists that were all great players. So there wasn't always a need for me to come in and be the guy that was the player. But I still did that with artists, if they needed it. But yeah, I probably fall in the category of being the kind of the technical wizard guy who brings the new technology to bear that lets the playing of whoever that person flourish. So maybe the person played a guitar part, but then I'll take it and transform it as a sound designer into something completely nuts, right? That'll feed back and inspire them to play differently and to do different things. I more enjoy doing that than like, adding bass to somebody's song, or, that's less of my thing, but I certainly do that. And with MIDI, obviously, I'm a pretty savvy MIDI programmer. I can add whatever I want, even if I can't really play the instrument, I can fake it. But with AI, we won't need that anymore, as we're going to discuss about today. It's all going to be done for us.
No, we won't need that anymore. So tell me more about the technology you have leveraged so far, right? Because AI has been around for a while, machine learning and stuff, right? And so you were maybe 10 years ago doing some stuff with AI. It just wasn't the hype that it is today. But tell me more about that, right? Your relationship, how do you leverage technology for the music industry? And also how, kind of how has been the music industry, how was the reaction to the different things you were doing across your path?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky that the people that were kind of my mentors, this Adrian Belew would be certainly one of them, right? Very well-known guitar player, King Crimson, Nine Inch Nails, Talking Heads, Frank Zappa, etc. I came up under somebody who was known for making crazy sounds and doing weird things with technology and like looking at what the intended use of a piece of tech was and like going as far in the opposite direction of that as he possibly could for the sake of being unique, right? Wanting to have your own voice and having technology be kind of the megaphone for it, right? So I was always into taking inspiration from some of these guys, Trent Reznor, like things like pre artificial being in music, but just generative music, right? Just the idea that, my whole ethos, more so even now than I think it was 10 or 15 years ago, is that curation is creation, right? Your taste is as important as any technical ability that you have to use a computer, to play a musical instrument, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, we talked about production earlier. A big part of production is you imparting, you helping the artist realize their taste, but potentially imparting your own taste to a project, right? So what I mean by that is on the generative side of things, like I might have a MIDI sequencer that just spits out a bunch of random notes, right? That just creates randomness. and then go back and curate out the little magical moments of that where things are happening that I would have never on my craziest day ever thought to compose or do something with, right? That take you in a new direction, or building randomizer patches in Max MSP, which will, okay, I'll attach that to a synthesizer so I can just randomize the synth until it comes up. I'm basically breaking it to come up with sounds that weren't presets that I would have never done. Those type of things pre-AI, right, were very kind of dumb processes where you're just randomizing stuff or adding some parameters in to guide the randomization. But the idea is that you're curating to inform your own creativity.
You need to go back between the holistic view of what of you have all the tracks and you're listening at the music and you listen it as a whole, and then you're thinking about ideas for one track or one piece of that track when the guitar is doing a solo, etc., etc. Do you have a process for going from one to the other? Is it more like an instinct? How does it work for you? Do you listen to it as a whole and then or do you go track by track? Do you have a process, or depends on the music that you are working with?
It kind of depends on, it's just more like a creative flow. And as things hit you, you kind of adjust and address them. More for me, it's more that than anything else. Again, because of the artists I work with, like they are great songwriters and great performers, right? So that side of thing is largely taken care of. And then it's like, okay, you have this structure of an idea. What can we add to it? What can we subtract to it? Because I'm also the mix engineer and also the mastering engineer oftentimes. I'm thinking also with multiple hats on at once, right? So I'm thinking about not just the way the puzzle pieces fit together as far as the arrangement goes, but also how is this going to be to mix? Are we missing elements that we need to broaden the frequency spectrum? Are we mastering line? I'm always kind of like, I'm thinking about the process as we go along, but I'm also looking at the end of the process because I'm going to be the one oftentimes participating in the entire flow, right? So it is interesting in that perspective. As a lot of people do, they wear all the hats these days. You kind of are looking very broadly at a project while also trying to get in there and handle the minute details as well. So that was a very nebulous answer to your question. I don't have a real strategy around that kind of stuff. It just kind of goes on a per song basis.
Perfect. And then as technology evolved, as new tools came along and more technology, more AI, more automation, what was the reaction of your peers, right? Was there any adverse reaction to like, oh, you are losing the magic, or, this doesn't feel real, or was it more excitement, like, look at all the things we can do?
Right. It was definitely more of the former than the latter. So more of the like, oh, this is gonna and it take away the joy or the creativity from humans or whatever. I think, especially when it's really fascinating. It's like the response to the word AI, the word artificial intelligence, is actually, that seems to draw out more anxiety from people than what a lot of honestly comparable advances in the music industry has been. Like, so if you think about it, and these examples have been used quite a bit, but I mean, back to the invention of the piano, right? Or the player piano, or digital technology, or plugins, or the idea that MIDI existed, right? Oh, I don't have to hire string players now. I can go buy a pack of MIDI loops, or I can go to Lander or Splice and get samples, and all of these things were disruptive in their own way and did upset as a segment of the music making community at the time, right? We don't really remember that because those people, that's not how things played out, right? Those things became, as most technology that is democratizing in some degree were disruptive and just became ubiquitous, and we all adopted it and we all used them. I mean, a lot of the people now who used to say that plugins will never sound good, it'll never be good, don't say that. They use them every day. They conveniently forget that they were those Luddites that fought against that stuff. And they're the same people who say stuff about AI. Now, AI has its good and its bad sides, right? So I'm not, certainly as we get into this discussion, I'm not going to be like everything AI is amazing, because it's not. But what I will say about AI powered creator tools is that they are just a logical extension of the things we've already been doing. Again, samples and loops, presets in synthesizers and plugins. And what is AI doing? They're just more intelligent and customizable now. If an AI you can prompt into it and it will create you something, or you can provide a reference file and it will extract the synth sound and give that to you, right? It's not that much different than what we've been doing previously. But yeah. But the reaction largely has been, and I'll frame it this way. When I started working at Lander, right? So I was one of the first two audio engineers to be affiliated with that company because they were very much used to people. Lander, by the way, for everybody, is a company, the first company, I believe, in the music industry to kind of use machine learning slash AI to automate a part of the music production process, right? And no one had done that at scale, meaning productized it, sold it, had users who loved it. That hadn't happened yet. And I came there about on their first anniversary. So I was early, but I wasn't there on day one, right? And the reaction of a lot of people, certainly audio engineers, who can be very, set in their ways, right,
Yeah.
about the things they like to do. And then I've said this a lot in the music industry, we really kind of fetishize the past, the way things used to be, the way things used to be recorded, analog tape. We really love that stuff. I love that stuff too, by the way. But we can hold on it maybe a little too tightly sometimes, where we fight against everything that's new. But the reaction was largely negative, and it was really, the reaction was twofold. And this is important to say because I think you'll see it's very, very similar to the way people are reacting to technology today. It hasn't really changed. Either people were dismissive of it, where they said it sucks, it's never going to sound good. It doesn't sound good now. That means it can never be good,
Yeah.
which is how professional, relatively open-minded people can still react to technology that way. Shocks me. It's like saying that Pro Tools 1 or Pro Tools 3, let's just pull that, like it'll never be any more, there'll never be any more features, it'll never sound better, it'll never, that's preposterous, right? It's like saying that whatever technology is at this moment, it will always be. But what I find is that people get hardcore tunnel vision whenever tech encroaches on their territory, right?
Yeah.
If somebody can look at a self-driving car and say, that's going to be amazing in 5 years. It's going to get so much better because they're not an Uber driver. They're not a truck driver. They're not somebody that technology is impacting the livelihood of. It's only going to potentially expand what you can do out in the world. But as soon as it comes into the arts, where maybe if you're making your living as a musician, you cannot think beyond the present day for a lot of people. And part of my job for almost 10 years now has been helping people think outside of that relatively closed-minded way of viewing things. Even if they're still right and it's problematic technology, I'm not trying to convince them otherwise. I'm just trying to get people to take a broader view. So quickly, one thing is they are dismissive. The other thing is that they're just totally threatened by it and it's going to end the world, right?
Yeah.
So like the people, if I could have taken a poll 10 years ago on Lander, the number of engineers who would have said mastering won't even exist in 10 years because it'll all be automated. There will be no more mastering engineers. Preposterous way to think, but that's what people kind of thought, right? I got told that I got people who were viscerally mad at me from working with a company that was doing that. But ultimately, what happened is what may happen with a lot of other tech we're going to talk about today, because I don't want to make this all about Lander, but it's an important example of a company that innovated and didn't have the effect that the people who are being quote unquote disrupted thought. Lander didn't replace mastering engineers, right? There's more mastering engineers right now than there's ever been, right? There's more music for us to master because as Lander scaled, the amount of content being created in the world scaled, right? To the point where you couldn't hire all the mastering engineers in the world to deal with all the content that currently exists. And there's not budgets for it, right? The most 90% of the people making music are never going to hire me or mastering engineers better than me to mix or to master their music or to mix their music, right? Like they can't, their microphone doesn't cost $100. How are they going to pay me $200 to master their song? It's preposterous to think that people should either do it themselves or hire a professional. And if there's anything in the middle there that is assistive to them, that's somehow not okay, which
Yeah.
is really kind of a privileged ivory tower way to view things, right? It's like, no, you spend the 10,000 hours to be good, or your music shouldn't sound good. People weren't saying that specifically, but that was what they were actually saying, whether they realized it or not. So what you have now is, again, using Lander as just an example, you have millions of people that mastered their music with Lander that were never going to go to a mastering engineer and that got something back sonically that surprised them, that was better than what they put in, that gave them, mastering is a small part of the production process. It made them feel good in a way that might get them to re-engage and make more music, right?
Yep.
And that is what a lot of this does, is you widen that funnel of people that not just get to participate, but feel like, wow, I did something that I'm really proud of. A percentage of those people say, well, what happens if I learn how to play guitar? Like, what happens if I went out and performed live? What happens if I move from just being somebody who's dabbling to somebody who's actually trying to make a career in the music industry? And even if just a fraction of a percentage of those millions of people do that, That feeds into the professional side of the industry. I get hired. Audio interface companies sell interfaces. They sell microphones. Mix engineers get jobs. Like, so I don't always look at it like, oh, it's just going to replace everything. No, it feeds into our industry as well, assuming it's done right and ethically, and a lot of the things that we'll chat about.
On the creative side, I'm getting more philosophical about it as we go deeper into the topic that we want to talk about. How do you feel? And this is completely subjective, and that's okay. That's the idea. How do you feel about music created with AI?
Yeah. So, boy, it's a complicated question, right? So so the question is like, how do I feel when I listen to it? How do I feel when I create it? How do I feel when I see
When you
other people
listen to it,
create it and their reaction to what they create? Right. I have different feelings kind of
let's
around different scenarios.
let's go to um like I will play any song right now without telling you if it's AI or not, and then
Yep.
listen to will you feel, and then I tell you
Oh, God.
that was created with Suno or Udio or whatever.
I would have no issue with it whatsoever.
If you
So,
like it,
meaning
you like it.
I think now I would be able to right now I would be able to tell if it was Suno or Udio because of the fidelity issues that they both have currently, right? Which could be resolved in 6 months or may never be resolved. We'll find out. But as far as like, if the question is like, do I think that an AI created piece of music can move me, right? Or can engage me or can surprise me? It can. Anybody who says it can't is not being truthful to themselves, because all AI is doing, the two that you just mentioned, especially Suno and Udio, right? There's a lot of generative AI stuff out there that just isn't very good yet, right? And a lot of it has to do with the training data. But if you're those two companies and you're largely just training on all the music that's available in the world, when we can talk about that, it's really assembling a bunch of amazing music into new music, right? And it's so it's to say that it can't move me. Well, what do you mean? Can the Beatles move you? Because if they train on the Beatles catalog, it's going to put together a Beatles song that maybe not every single one is amazing, but enough of them are going to have a similar, effect on you to an actual Beatles song. Like, if you remove the nostalgia and you remove the history of it, but just actually as a work of art, AI can totally do that. And that's only been the case very recently. Udio's only been around for 2 weeks. Suno's been around for longer, but not that much longer. We flew so far ahead of where most of the world, myself included, realized we were with generative music in the past couple of months. It's shocking. Yeah, anyway, we'll get into that. But yes, AI music, especially the current state of AI music, can be as impactful to you as anything else that you would hear from an artist. And it's important to note, this goes far beyond music, right? One of the reasons that some of these platforms, the vocals sound so good on some of these platforms is they're training on podcasts and historic speeches and comedy shows and all of this stuff, which is fascinating because you can go to Suno or Udio specifically and just make a podcast, right? You can make a conversation between Abraham Lincoln and Winston Churchill. You can make a comedy show that never existed, where that you actually input your own comedy into, and or just let it generate itself based on a topic that sounds amazing and completely natural. It is. I am daily shocked by what people are doing with the technology and where it's at.
My next question, and this is bringing us deeper into the trippy side of these things, is what is the creative act, and what is
Yep.
art, and is there art in good prompting, right? And I was looking at the definition of art, right? Like the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in a visual form as a painting or blah, 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 that is appreciated for their beauty or emotional power, right? And so, yes,
Yep.
technology is aiding us do a lot of stuff, but wasn't it aiding us before in different ways? I mean, like, there's so much pop music out there. It's kind of, the process is sort of similar. It's
Yes.
still moving people, and it's still, eliciting emotions and touching them, as you
Yep.
said. So what do you think? How do you think about the creative act? And do you think there is art in good prompting?
Yeah. So, I mean, the creative act, what are we doing when we create, right? We are, as we are, with everything in our lives, we're really just an amalgamation of our experiences and what we've ingested over the course of our lives, right? So we're assimilating all of that stuff and coming up with, whether it's a painting or a script or a piece of music, something that we hope is a novel idea, right? And that's kind of copyright speak, but the idea that we've done something that we feel no one else has done, right? Everyone loves that idea about creation. Is this is, even if it's only subtly different, this is my stamp. I did this, it is unique to me. I think that's one of the sparks of that brings people back to create, is it feels great to do that, right? And now there may be 100,000 other songs in the world that are exactly like your song, but if you're ignorant to that, you don't know, and it's inspiring, right? Because there's only so many notes, man. Especially if you're making pop music, right? It's a lot of it's been done. But well, so, and this kind of alludes to what I was saying earlier. As you've seen technology kind of inform music production, right? It hasn't changed the emotional response people have to music as music production. Even people, I can work with a hip hop artist who drags in a beat they had nothing to do with creating and adds one rap on top of that, not doubled vocals, just a single vocal, and that can have millions of streams and impact tons and tons of people. And yeah, he wrote the lyrics, or maybe he would use ChatGPT to help him write the lyrics. No one would know, right? But if he's able to convey some emotion through what is a fairly simple production process in that case, that's effective as if I scored a symphony to a lot of listeners. And I think art is also very subjective, because there's people who would say what I just described to you is not art. They
Yeah.
would say the symphony is an art, or bebop jazz, that's art. But the trap thing that guy did, that's not art. But for a lot of people, it is, right? It's completely relative to, so that when people say to me like, oh, I don't think AI music will ever do something that's emotionally impactful. Well, it depends upon what's emotionally impactful to you as well, right? Because we're all different. But prompting, so to get to your question about prompting, it's also a bit relative, but it's, again, if me dragging in a bunch of splice loops counts as art, right? Then what is the difference between me going on Splice and saying hip hop beat or punk song and getting a couple of things that are already together that I can just drop in, and okay, now I'm an artist now. What's the difference between writing a prompt and that says give me a punk song that sounds like this with just heavily distorted guitar with whatever, right? So do I respect it as much as I respect somebody who's going out and scoring something, or somebody who's making a beat from the ground up and sampling all their own stuff? No. Can I say that it's not some form of human expression? If the person feels like they're expressing themselves, then it is, right? Like, but yeah, that's a hard question to answer.
It is a hard question. Um, Thinking about the impact, let's do this. Let's talk first about a potential positive impact that these tools can have, right? And the first is, you talked about access, you talked about democratizing, right? Now everyone can be more into music, right? And as you were talking, and I was talking, I was thinking about prompting, and I was thinking about impact, and a mother or a father, they want to give something to their child. They are not musically inspired, but maybe they have a lot of things they want to put into a lyric, and they go and then they ask Suno or Uri or whatever to create a song for the birthday of their you know children, that has all of these facts that happen, etc., etc. And then a beautiful song comes up, and then I don't know. That's a weird example of a positive impact, and maybe more people getting into understanding more about music creation. What else can you think about that you go like, this is going to be like super positive?
Yeah, I don't think that's a weird example, actually. I mean, think about how anybody gets into, not everybody, but for certain people, how they get into making music or playing guitar, or, okay, you don't have access to a guitar, so you find a turntable and you use that to make music on, and that leads it's like there's different access points for different people where they feel empowered to participate in the music production process, right? And as much as I understand the hate of this idea that somebody can just type things in or and create something, that is a point of access for people. And I said this before, a percentage of those people are going to be like, oh, I'd like to learn how to play that thing I just made on piano, or I'd like to learn, right? It'll inspire me. Not everybody, obviously, but I do think it will be inspiring to some people to move upward. And by the way, what these tools are really good for, like Udio is a great example of this. If I'm a poet or I write lyrics, everybody can do that, right? Even if you don't feel like they're good enough to share with people, you can write some lyrics, even if you don't use AI to help you with that, which you could. You can type those in and be very specific about the type of music you want and get a beautifully sung song with your lyrics out of this. Now, you can say, well, that person, it would have been much better if they had learned how to use Pro Tools and program MIDI and done it themselves, or hired a band or hired a composer and an orchestra, whatever, man. None of the people that are going to be using this are the people that would be doing that, right? So you're not taking anything away. Now, fandom is a whole different story. Listeners competing for listenership and all that stuff with a lot of this content is where I think people are really concerned. It's not that they think people are going to not hire musicians as a result of it. But yeah, it's interesting. So I think that, like I said earlier, bringing more people in to participate will bring a percentage of those people upward, which is what you said. You're also going to see these tools. I mean, in the next 5 years, if you are making music using a computer, using a DAW, using plugins, you're going to be, and it's almost the case now, using AI, whether you like it or not, or whether you know it or not. We're not even going to call it AI. Right now, it's just a freaking branding thing so that you'll say, my toaster comes with AI now, so that people will buy more of that toaster. It's like, it's just software that's inside of other software, right? That will facilitate whatever you want to do, whether you're a kid who wants to type something in and get a song, or you're using Pro Tools at the highest level on a massive film project and you want to automate all the restoration and clean up your dialogue, right? It doesn't matter. It's going to be something that will meet you wherever you are and automate things that are frustrating to you. And if different things are frustrating to different people based upon their skill set, their experience, and their commitment to learn or not learn, the traditional tools of production. And I think we have to remember that it's going to be everywhere, and that's okay, right? And it's not going to have the impact that I think a lot of people fear it's going to have.
On the negative side, some people will say that there will be a displace, a lowering on the value, right? I mean, there is more access for everyone, but at the same time, now because there is more access, people are willing to pay less for it, or at least, some of the people, right? I go back to what you said about the people that are willing to spend less were always willing to spend less. But at the same time, let's, an example, my company, a software development company, and now we are redoing our website and we have to do a video for the home page, right? We have different options. And one option we are pursuing is we are doing everything with AI. We are doing the script ourselves. We are giving the prompts, right? But, we are a startup. We are very mindful about what we spend. And I feel no shame in saying that, hey, I'm probably going that route. So what do you think about that, and what changes do you see on the negative side of things?
Yeah, so a couple of things, one of which is on kind of the service provider side of things, which is what you're talking about. Like, you would typically have gone outside of your company and hired somebody probably to do that for you, right? Because just how else would you have done that unless you hired a team member on board, blah, 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 right? So yeah, I mean, there's no question that AI, much like computers, much like, freaking the abacus, whatever, is going to replace cars, right? Everything has replaced. Jobs are always getting replaced as tech moves forward. Now, the fear of AI, and it's a legitimate fear, is the scale of this is maybe a little beyond what we've seen before as far as its ability to impact very quickly a number of sections of the job market, not just a couple, right? So I think that's a legitimate concern. And it's, my question is kind of what the timetable is on that. I mean, it's like, I do think what you're going to see is more of this separation between, we're going to lose that middle class of service provider, right? So like, the person that you were getting on Fiverr to do your website for $100 or whatever, right? If the companies are still going to hire professionals to do this work, right? There's companies that aren't like you and me are in startups, right? But people who have budgets where it's incredibly important and they're very specific about what they want. They're going to a professional, even if that professional is using AI, right? It's fine. They don't care. They just want it done. And maybe that professional can't charge quite as much, or it's more competitive. but that's still going to exist. That counts for mix engineers, mastering engineers, musicians. It doesn't matter. The people who excel are still going to be valuable. I do worry about that kind of middle tier person who's maybe a little less skilled, but is because of that charges less and can meet companies like yours and mine kind of where they are at the price point with
Right.
adequate quality. Like some of those people are going to leverage AI and just have to do more work, right? And bring in more
Yep.
clients at a lower price point. And some of them are just going to be replaced like you're doing, kind of doing it yourself. And that's just a reality, man. And I don't think, again, it's concerning, but it always happens, right? It's just we can't yet foresee how dramatic the of an impact that's going to have on the AI side of things. And the last thing I'll say about this is that a lot of AI tools, and I talked about this with some of the AI generative music stuff, are good, but they're not great yet. And
Yeah.
it's easy for something to get to be, it's much easier for something to get to that 80% of good. It's much, much harder for it to get that extra 20% to truly be great. We're just making the assumption right now that AI music and generative video and all these things are just going to continue on this path. And in 6 months, they're going to be perfect. I don't actually think that's going to be the case, right? There's still going to be, people are going to love it, but there's still going to be a difference between what an expert does and what these tools are capable of, at least for the foreseeable future.
Self-driving is an example of that. It's an example of a promise that has been there for a while. And I keep talking to experts, and it's like they look at me like, no, I mean, it needs to be within certain parameters. It's going to take way longer than people think, right? It's the
Yeah.
opposite of what we're talking about.
Yeah, 5 years ago, if you had asked everybody, I would have probably said, oh, self-driving cars are going to be a thing. 5 years? Are you kidding me? 2 years? Well, we won't even be driving anymore. Not the case. See, that's again a perfect example of that type of tech.
um, Musicians today, I was looking into this, right, and all sources seem to indicate that musicians make more money today from live performance than selling records or streaming, et cetera, et cetera. Will you say that that is accurate?
Ooh, I think it's generally, yeah. I think the problem is, if you're a musician and you embark on a proper tour, the amount of expense that you have to put out of pocket for that, sometimes you just come out breaking even and or losing money sometimes on tours.
Right.
But generally, as a musician, like right now, if I lost every one of my jobs, I could go out and gig and make a living for myself, right? I can do small shows. I'm not trying to put on a big tour to promote an album and do marketing, right? I can go out and play music that people enjoy listening to, and I can make a living from that more than I would make if I put my music up on streaming, as an example, right? So I think it is easier to make money through live performance than there is through streaming. And by the way, the influence AI might have on the music industry is more of an emphasis on people wanting to see how the sausage is made, meaning they want to see live performance, a new respect for artistry of people that can actually do it. Who knows if that's actually going to be the case? But I think it's a very logical outcome of all of this. Is if we can all the thing, and I'm going to go off on a tangent. What is the thing that draws me to somebody else's art? I am drawn to something when I see somebody do something that is beyond my capability, right? That I see, I'm just so impressed by a guitar player. It's like, oh, they don't have to be a virtuoso, but they're approaching the instrument. Their taste is something that is just so different than mine, or they're a better player, or whatever. It goes for composers, it goes for anybody. And when we can all open up our phone and type in a song and it spits it out, right?
Yeah.
I do think the live side of things, where you get to see it being done, actually might become even more valuable as a result of that because it'll be more special.
Yeah. And that's a conversation that
I
I'm
hope.
having with no, I hope as well. But you know what? I've heard so many people have that same hope, and we are still at the driving wheel, right? I mean, we're still at the driving seat.
Yeah.
So it I mean, we are all saying that, everything that's going on with AI, all the automation that will happen, it will only, you know, make us have more emphasis on the value that comes from human relationships, human interaction, and that human factor or element that exists as well in live performance, right? I agree. I tend to agree. I tend to have that same reading. I tend to have that, for companies, the value added of good customer service, human beings, when you have a good human being in front of you and
Right.
helps you. Um, but at the same time, so many processes are pushing everything to your side, right? I mean, I don't know,
Yeah.
like, so I don't know. I hope that is the case as well. So the copyright thing with Suno and Yurio and all the discussion, there's is the way that they are learning, the way that they are going through all of the existing music.
Yep.
Is it transformative, fair use? Is it not? Should they be paying licenses for the training as well? Some
Yep.
regulations in other countries are going that way. Some regulations are going different ways. I think there was a proposal for a bill in California so that these systems would have to pay licenses for
Yeah.
musicians for using copyrighted work. How do you feel about that? And also tie that to, you talk a lot about ethical AI, right? So how do you feel about that? And what is ethical AI?
Yeah, great. Boy, I don't know. Ethical AI is also kind of a nebulous term these days. Like, what exactly does that actually mean? Um, okay, so first to the data licensing side of things, right? So, I mean, yeah, there's only a few ways this can really play out for companies that are just training on music unscrupulously, right? They're just taking it in, training on whatever they want. It's why it's getting so good so fast, right? And I wrote a thing on LinkedIn about this the other day. It's kind of a very Silicon Valley mindset where it's like, we know there's going to be legal issues around this. We are not going to care because we are going to prioritize moving quickly, right? And amassing a user base and getting a lot of, raising money and all of that type of stuff. And then we'll use the leverage we gain with all that to help, mitigate these legal issues that we realize we're stumbling into. And remember, there's the people at a lot of these companies are actually musicians. They're not just, and I know because I've talked to them, right? It's not just like Silicon Valley programmer, want to break the music industry, don't care about music. It's not that. It's not what you would actually think when you talk to people behind this. So it's not maybe as nefarious as we would like to make it out to be,
Right.
because it makes us feel better. But they are training on pretty much whatever they want, right? And that can only go a few ways. I mean, one way is that this is deemed fair use, right? And it's all fine. And then we're going to just basically litigate on the output. So if the output is just like we do now, right? If you
Yeah.
write a song and that song is too close to my song, whether you knew, especially if you would have somehow had access and listened to that song. And of course, with AI, it's listened to everything. So it makes it a hell of a lot more enforceable when it's like, well, you had access to all the music in the world. We know you heard it. So you wrote a song that sounds like a Taylor Swift song. But to me, like, what does that do to the court system, right? If an AI can make 1 million songs a day and every artist could basically launch a lawsuit every day about that, it just seems like it might be incentivized to because they really are pissed at the AI company for doing that. It
Yeah.
just feels like a nightmare, and totally unscalable. The other alternative would be there's some type of compulsory licensing mechanism for this, right? Where it says if you kind of like cover songs, right? Where it's like, okay, if you allow somebody to cover your song once, then anybody else can pretty much cover it and you're paid this rate, right? And it's a mandated rate. So if you opt into training, if you allow it for one company, everybody can do it, and this is the amount that you get paid. Because negotiating on a song by song or artist by artist or label by label or publisher by publisher basis would be prohibitive, right? And I understand from tech's perspective, it's like, okay, well, we can't build technology if we have to do that. So there has to be something else. Okay, there's going to be some maybe middle ground there. The other option would be, and this is the last thing, um, would be that if they have built up a large enough user base, if they have built up enough of the public's interest in this and people are engaging and participating, which they are, and that's growing a lot on a day. People really enjoy making AI music, by the way. If you haven't gone to these sites and read forums and see how inspired people are by this, it ain't going away. So if they can build up enough of a pie that they can monetize, then that's their leverage to go to record labels and publishers and artists and say, look, like this is happening. We built it without your permission, but it exists. So what do you want to do? Do you want a piece of the pie? Let's negotiate. Let's come to terms on licensing. And it may be even some parties who would have never chosen to work with those companies might say, all right, well, it's already out there in the world. It's been done. I might as well get my cut. And I think some variation of those three things are going to happen here. But I would be surprised if it just comes out that it's fair use and there's no licensing needed and it's all okay. And I realize that the argument is, well, the AI is just learning the same way a human would learn, right? It's just ingesting stuff and it's spitting something out and all of that. I don't know. Boy, this is just going to be so fascinating because you have big tech and then you have the music industry
Right.
both lobbying this, right? Hardcore. and we'll see where it comes out. I don't actually know, but I think it'll probably be some sort of licensing mandate on licensing.
It will be interesting
But
to.
again, the music already exists. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of tracks are being created every week using unlicensed, using Taylor Swift songs, using Ed Sheeran songs, using Dr. Dre songs. That's happening now, you know, like, ugh.
Or how do you stop? The other thing about I thought about, you said it yourself, right? You can have a MIDI instrument randomly put out some notes, and then you pick up like the pieces that have an effect on you, right? I can do the same thing, but I will have an output that is trained on with AI, right? And then I get inspired, and then I simply go and record a copy of the song that I didn't show anyone, right? How do you even find out, right? How do you even control that sort of inspiration? It's like, it's impossible. So it's I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
For younger generations, right? You are an educator as well. How are your students reacting to everything that's going on? What are your conversations with them?
That's a great question. So I do a fair bit of talking to universities and students outside of even my own. And it kind of depends. Like now, I spoke at, this is a little while ago, last year, at a college in London. It was all composition students, right? So they were all there learning orchestral composition, composition for film and television. And this is last year, right? So this is a lot of has happened. This is maybe middle of last year. And they were, as you would imagine, extremely anxious about all of this, right? Because and I talk to my own students about this. Think about this. If you're getting a 4-year degree, you came into college with this not being a topic of conversation at all, right? There was a very traditional, I mean, there's no traditional path in the music industry, but there was a more traditional path for you, right? And AI wasn't this looming threat. And while you're at school trying to learn all the basic stuff, right? The specter of AI appears, and you feel like a lot of the stuff that you're spending a lot of your money and time learning is being automated away. And then what are you when you graduate, right? So I've experienced a lot of, for the students that are actually paying attention. And as a student, you've got all sorts of other things. You got your social life, you've got sports, you've got, your band, you've got school. You're not always paying as attention to the evolution of technology as people like me and you are, right? So a lot of them actually don't know as much as you might think about what's happening out in the world, but some of them certainly do. And yeah, they're nervous about it. I try to, kind of like what I'm doing with you here. I'm trying to paint like, yes, there's negatives. Yes, there's positives. Yes, there's opportunities. Yes, there's issues. And, the best thing you can do is educate yourself so that, I'm a good example of that. I didn't plan to transition from being a music producer and an audio engineer into working in startups and AI tools. And I didn't even know those were jobs that existed in the world, right? Like, so, but as I learned more about them, I was like, oh, wow, the music industry, as you come to find out, is a lot broader than what people think when they go into a school, right? You're looking at, I want to be a producer, I want to be a composer, I want to be these things that are great, but you can use those skills to do a lot of other things for a lot of companies out there in the world while you're also doing your really, like distilled creative thing that you want to do as an artist. And I think that's the thing that I try to impart to my kids is how broad the world is, and no AI is going to have an impact. In some ways, it makes things even more broad as far as what they can do when they get out. It's just different.
It's crazy. It's look, music is this strange alchemy that, it's sound waves impacting us, our body, our brain, and that's creating an impact on us that is so powerful, right? So maybe we have a future where, I don't know, you have your own AI that understands you more than anyone, and music creates feelings, and you're feeling down, and it can, just create whatever you need exactly for that moment. It can get super crazy, right?
Yeah, but that exists. I mean, those type of things exist now, right? Where and actually, this is an interesting topic that I find. I'd love your opinion on this, actually. So, we talk a lot about what AI is going to allow us to do is make everything personalized. Everything is customized to you, right? So almost like ads are, where, okay, so I might have written a song, but you might hear that song arranged in a way based upon your listening habits and tastes and the genres of music you like that's going to make you really get you hooked, right? Beyond maybe if I composed a bossa nova and that's not your thing, right?
Right.
It'll appear to you as something that you actually might be interested in. Or it's a film, and it's people talk about this all the time, right? We can do anything we want pretty much when it comes to that stuff, or it changes based upon your heart rate or your mood. But I think that's cool, right? But I think that one of the things we love so much about art is the shared experience of a piece of art, right? And if it's different all the time and different for everyone, and there's no source of truth, there's still a market for that stuff, but it's not as disruptive as we would think. This goes for AI generated music as well, because people enjoy shared experiences, whether you're going to the movies or you're talking about a song that you love. Look at Taylor Swift's new album that's out now. Good God, my nieces are just like obsessed with it. And in a vacuum, I don't know if they would be as obsessed with it. It's the community around the music and that shared experience. It's so powerful. Live shows, it all. So I think this ability for us to make whatever we want all the time, we overestimate how many people actually want to even do that, right? Like lots of people, even if they can participate in the music creation process, they might do it once as like a meme thing to send their mother on for her birthday. But it's not going to be something where like, well, I'm going to be an artist now and put music on Spotify, which Spotify is not going to allow that in the future. Though you're going to see kind of a separation of AI generated music from stuff that comes from mostly humans. So all humans will be using a lot of humans will be using AI to some degree. But I think we overestimate the impact because we underestimate what people are fans of, and it's not just the music itself, right? They want to know about the artist, they want to know about all these other things, they want that shared experience around the creator and their creation, and I think that's not going away.
I agree, but sometimes I think, it's just because I'm an older generation. But let me tell you two examples of a weird thing I do just because I want the shared experience, right?
Okay.
So, for example, streaming, right? Streaming is beautiful, but I don't get the same feeling that I will get like, okay, it's when there's programmed streaming, like, okay, Sunday 9 at night, it's Game of Thrones, and everybody will be watching it at the same
Yeah.
time, right? So I feel a different way. Or TV, just looking at a TV show and thinking that everyone is looking at that at the same time. Or radio, old school radio, right? Just old school
Live
radio,
sports is another one. Yeah.
sports, live sports, etc., etc. Everyone is looking at it at the same time. You were saying what you were saying, and I was like nodding, and I completely 500% agree with what you said. My mind was more on specific uses, and I agree with you. People will get bored eventually, but like I don't know, like therapy and music for therapy, and very like niche, specific, curated situations. But anyhow, Daniel, one last question to you.
Sure.
and for people that love their work as much as you do, I'm always scared to ask this because but what do you do when you are not working?
So I'm again almost embarrassed to answer this question. So I don't not work.
Right.
And it's been the case for 10, 15 years now, where like I don't have there's no such thing as a hobby in my life, right? Everything, a hobby actually would be if I played the guitar right now, like that would feel like, oh, I'm not working, I'm playing an actual instrument. I am so probably unhealthily obsessed with music technology, with engineering music, with all of it, all. So I don't actually ever, this is such a cliche, and I'm sorry. I don't ever, even though I'm working, I mean, I work right now, I'm on 18 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. I mean, I'm going hard right now. I don't feel like I'm working at all because I'm so excited about not everything. There's paperwork and bullshit that I hate doing, but most of it, I'm using ChatGPT to automate some of that stuff away. Most of what I'm doing, and that's a good use for AI. You can get rid of some of the small stuff you don't like. Yeah, I just love it, man. So I would say, okay, so I have a 20-month-old daughter, right? So I waited till late in life to have kids. I had a daughter, and she is the thing that if when I'm not working, I actually want to be spending time with her. Which if you had told me this 2 years ago, I'd said you were crazy, because I'm like a gunner, like I'm hardcore. Nothing is going to distract me. I love my wife, I love my daughter. Spending time with them definitely would be the thing that I do when I'm not working. And outside of that, it's nothing else. And heck, we're all there. I've got my daughters running around learning how to play instruments. It's actually tangentially got me really back into music and playing the actual analog instruments because as a child, the computer, I don't want her on the computer, but I
Right.
want her playing the hand pans and I want her playing the guitars and the piano. And it's really brought me back to this, just to circle back to the first question you asked me, that joy of learning an instrument and feeling what it's like the first time to play something and to hear sounds that you've never, like getting to experience that through my kid is really kind of changed my life and brought me back to what got me into music in the first place.
Very, very happy to hear that. It's magic, and we should never let that magic go away from our lives. So I'm very, very happy for you on that. Um, Daniel, this has been amazing. You are, I know you were planning on coming to Uruguay sometime. You're officially
Yeah.
invited. I have a barbecue right next to this place that I
Oh,
have
come on.
here.
I will.
So
I've told you I absolutely love Uruguay. Like I've had some good times there, and it's just been 8 or 9 years since I've been. So I will be back, and we will hang out in Montevideo.
very good. Thank you so much, Daniel. We'll stay in touch.
All right, thank you, Mateo.